On September 22, 2023, investigators finally located the long-missing remains of Suzanne Morphew, nearly 3 years after she had suddenly vanished on May 10, 2020. The discovery, made in a remote part of Moffat in Saguache County, Colorado, happened during a separate investigation and reignited interest in a case that had long since gone cold. For many, it was the moment they had been waiting for, a break in a mystery that had haunted an entire community. From the very beginning, suspicion circled close to home. Suzanne's personal life was complicated, and her husband's strange stories and shifting accounts quickly drew the attention of investigators. For over 2 years, authorities pursued him as the central suspect, convinced that he was responsible for what they believed was a murder. But with the recovery of Suzanne's remains miles away from where they had ever searched, and new forensic findings connecting her death to a possible serial predator, the narrative suddenly shifted. Could it be that Barry Morphew was more cunning than police ever anticipated? Or is it possible that Suzanne's disappearance was linked to someone else entirely, someone from outside her home, or even from her past? Suzanne Morphew was born on April 11, 1971, to her parents Jean and Adrian. She grew up alongside her brothers David and Andrew, who later described her as a caring, intelligent, and thoughtful soul who left a lasting impression on everyone she met. While still in high school, she crossed paths with Barry Morphew, a popular athlete with a promising career ahead of him. After several years of dating, the two married, seemingly building a life together that others admired. Barry had once been drafted to play professional baseball with the Toronto Blue Jays, but an injury ended his sports ambitions before they could truly begin. He eventually shifted to a career in landscaping and horticulture, while Suzanne pursued her passion for teaching, building a reputation as a kind and dedicated educator. Together, they had 2 daughters, Mallory and Macy. To many outsiders, their family seemed ideal, a devoted couple raising children in a stable, comfortable home. But life was not without its trials. Suzanne was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma and fought her way through cancer twice, proving her resilience. By 2018, the Morphew family relocated from Indiana to the small town of Maysville, Colorado. The move was meant to give them a new beginning, closer to nature and near Mallory's college. Their new property sprawled over 7 acres, complete with forests where Barry could hunt and trails for Suzanne's newfound love of mountain biking. On the surface, it was a picturesque fresh start. Then came Mother's Day weekend of 2020, the day that would forever change everything. Sunday, May 10th, began unlike any other holiday. Barry claimed he had to leave town for a landscaping job in Broomfield, about 3 hours from their home. Meanwhile, their daughters were away on a camping trip, leaving Suzanne alone for most of the day. That evening, Mallory and Macy texted their mother to wish her a happy Mother's Day, but to their surprise, they received no response. Suzanne was known to be active on social media, and she had even promised to share photos from her best friend's daughter's wedding. The silence felt unnatural. Concern grew quickly. After several hours passed, the girls asked a family friend, neighbor Jean Ritter, to stop by and check on their mum. When Mrs. Ritter arrived, she found the Morphew home empty. Alarmed, she called Barry to inform him. He instructed her to check whether Suzanne's bike was missing, adding that if it wasn't, she should contact the police. The authorities soon arrived, and Barry and his daughters rushed back to the property, anxious for answers. That night, deputies found Suzanne's mountain bike off a steep ravine, not far from the house. At first glance, it looked like she might have crashed during a ride, but something about the scene felt off. There were no skid marks, no bent wheels or scratches to suggest a violent tumble, no blood or broken branches nearby. The area appeared staged. To investigators, it looked as if someone had intentionally placed the bike there. When Barry was told about the discovery, his reaction raised eyebrows. He immediately floated the idea that Suzanne had been attacked by a mountain lion, a theory he repeated in various conversations, including one secretly recorded by a YouTuber. Yet his story never seemed to match the evidence. Friends and family began noticing odd behavior as well. While Suzanne's brother organized search efforts, Barry rarely joined in. Instead, he distanced himself, spinning explanations that made little sense. Soon, investigators uncovered another troubling clue. Suzanne's helmet was found nearly a mile from the Morphew home, but in the exact opposite direction from Broomfield, the place Barry claimed he had driven that day. Even more concerning, the data from his Ford F-350 showed that early that morning, he had driven west for about a mile before heading out of town, contradicting his statement that he had gone straight to the job site. When questioned, Barry quickly adjusted his story, claiming he had been scouting elk at dawn. Investigators pointed out it would have been too dark at that time to track animals, and his explanations grew shakier with each retelling. He later gave yet another version of events, suggesting he and Suzanne had shared a wonderful day together before her disappearance. A morning hike, a steak dinner, intimacy, and a peaceful night's rest. But when officers compared his claims to the digital evidence, the inconsistencies were glaring. His phone data revealed unusual activity that afternoon, including strange movements around the property, followed by his device being switched to airplane mode for nearly 8 hours. The dinner he described was questionable as well. Police found only one dirty plate in the sink, not two. Even more alarming, his truck logs indicated bizarre behavior that night. While he insisted he had gone to bed early with Suzanne, the records showed his vehicle reversing nearly 100 feet around 9:30 p.m., an hour after he claimed to be asleep. Between 3:25 and 3:48 a.m., his truck doors opened and shut over 80 times. Investigators theorized this may have been when he moved Suzanne's body, though no direct proof could confirm it. The next day, Barry drove to Broomfield, but investigators discovered there was no active project requiring him to be there. Surveillance footage painted a troubling picture. Instead of working, Barry was seen disposing of multiple trash bags near McDonald's and a hotel, while a co-worker later reported smelling strong bleach in his room. For investigators, the circumstantial evidence was piling up fast, pointing toward a man who appeared to be hiding something. Yet the question lingered. If Barry was guilty, where was the proof of a motive? And if he wasn't, then what had really happened to Suzanne Morphew that Mother's Day weekend? As investigators dug deeper, the motive they had been searching for slowly came into focus. Suzanne and Barry's marriage, which on the outside looked like the perfect love story, was in reality collapsing behind closed doors. Their daughters may have seen a united front, but Suzanne's private notes and text messages told another story, one filled with tension, unhappiness, and even fear. Suzanne had confided to friends that Barry could be controlling, sometimes even aggressive. She worried about his drinking and admitted she didn't feel safe being alone with him. In the Notes app on her phone, she had documented grievances about their marriage, painting a picture of a relationship weighed down by conflict and mistrust. Divorce had been on her mind, but Barry allegedly refused to consider it. Her phone also revealed something else, a secret that would become central to the investigation. In 2018, Suzanne had reconnected with an old high school acquaintance named Jeff. What began as conversations slowly developed into a romance, one that carried on for nearly 2 years. Suzanne confided in Jeff about her struggles at home and how she longed for a new beginning. Investigators later confirmed that on May 9th, just one day before she disappeared, Suzanne had been exchanging dozens of messages with him, even sending him a selfie around 2:10 p.m. But then, abruptly, all activity on her phone stopped. That sudden silence raised red flags. Investigators theorized that something may have happened to her in the afternoon of May 9th, despite Barry's claims that their evening together had been peaceful and uneventful. Inside the Morphew home, detectives found additional troubling signs. In the fireplace, they uncovered what they believed were remnants of Suzanne's journal burned to ashes. In the dryer, they discovered the cap from a tranquilizer dart. A bullet casing was located in the bedroom, and the doorframe showed signs of damage. While none of this provided absolute proof, it fueled the suspicion that a violent confrontation may have taken place. The tranquilizer dart cap was especially chilling. Investigators already knew Barry had a history of tranquilizing animals, specifically elk, to cut off their antlers for sale. Could he have used the same method on his wife? His phone data showing erratic movements on the property that afternoon added to the suspicion, as though he had been carrying out a disturbing plan. Still, law enforcement had no body, no weapon, and no definitive cause of death. What they did have, however, was a mountain of circumstantial evidence that seemed to place Barry at the center of the mystery. In May 2021, nearly a year after Suzanne disappeared, Barry was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and attempting to influence a public servant. The arrest shocked the community, but what followed was even more unsettling. Details of the case trickled into the public as court hearings began, and the story of Suzanne's disappearance became national news. Prosecutors presented their theory. Barry killed Suzanne on the afternoon of May 9, 2020, likely after confronting her about her affair. They believed he then transported her body using his truck, disposed of key evidence in trash bins across Broomfield, and possibly dismembered her in a hotel room before burying her in an unmarked grave. To support this theory, they highlighted his lies, the suspicious truck data, the burned journal, and the tranquilizer dart cap. But the defense was ready with a counterattack. They poked holes in the prosecution's timeline and questioned the reliability of the evidence. For example, cadaver dogs had never detected human remains in Barry's car or the hotel room. The dart gun that prosecutors suspected he had used was reportedly broken at the time, and photos of the dart cap in the dryer appeared inconsistent. One image showed it there, another did not, raising questions about whether it had been planted or mishandled. Then came the bombshell revelation that nearly derailed the entire case. DNA found on Suzanne's Range Rover and on her bike helmet did not match Barry. Instead, it partially matched profiles linked to 3 unsolved sexual assault cases in other states. This discovery raised the chilling possibility that Suzanne could have been targeted by a serial predator rather than her husband. What made the revelation even more damaging to the prosecution was that the defense claimed they hadn't been informed of this DNA evidence until much later in the proceedings. In other words, crucial information that could have pointed to an alternative suspect had been withheld, whether by accident or by negligence. This revelation cast serious doubt on the integrity of the case. For the defense, the foreign DNA was a turning point. They argued that the prosecution had built their case entirely on speculation, ignoring the possibility of another perpetrator. If someone else's DNA was found in Suzanne's car, then why had investigators focused so heavily on Barry? The judge presiding over the preliminary hearing faced immense pressure. On one hand, the state had poured thousands of hours into investigating Barry. On the other, the evidence was far from airtight. In September 2021, the court allowed the case to move forward, but set Barry's bail at $500,000. After paying, he walked out of jail, flanked by his daughters, who continued to stand by his side. The drama didn't end there. Just days before the trial was set to begin in 2022, prosecutors suddenly filed a motion to dismiss the charges without prejudice. This meant they were essentially hitting pause. They could refile charges against Barry in the future if new evidence came to light. Their official reasoning was that without a body, without more forensic proof, and with mounting doubts about their investigation, it would be nearly impossible to secure a conviction. For Barry, it was a public victory. He left the courthouse smiling, his daughters beside him. For Suzanne's family, however, it was devastating. They were left with no closure, no answers, and no justice. The case lingered in limbo until September 22, 2023, exactly 3 years and 4 months after Suzanne disappeared. On that day, investigators stumbled upon several shallow graves during an unrelated search in Saguache County, more than 50 miles from the Morphew home. Among the remains found was Suzanne, identified through dental records and the medical report from her cancer treatments. The discovery reignited the mystery. How had she ended up there? And most importantly, who had put her there? Suzanne's body being found 50 miles from her home forced investigators and the public alike to reconsider everything they thought they knew. For 3 years, the search had been focused around the Morphew property, the nearby trails, and the mountain ranges surrounding Maysville. Yet, here she was, discovered in an isolated area that had never even been on law enforcement's radar. This single fact raised a haunting question. If Barry truly was the one responsible, how had he managed to move her body so far without leaving behind a single trace? His truck's data showed no sign of him traveling to Moffat on May 9th or 10th. Did this mean he had help, or was someone else entirely to blame? Some investigators theorized that Barry might have enlisted someone to assist in transporting Suzanne's remains. Others wondered whether he could have made the trip on another day, outside the window of her disappearance, when authorities weren't watching him so closely. Still, none of those ideas had hard evidence to back them up. And now, with the discovery of foreign DNA tied to other criminal cases, the possibility of an outside suspect had grown stronger than ever. Barry's defense attorney, Iris Ayton, was quick to seize on the new developments. She publicly argued that Suzanne's death bore the hallmarks of a serial killer's work. The fact that her remains were found in what appeared to be a boneyard in Saguache County suggested to her that Suzanne was not the only victim. If that was true, then Barry had been unfairly vilified by investigators who had tunnel vision from the very start. Meanwhile, Barry himself wasted no time in striking back. In the wake of his wife's body being found, he filed a $15 million lawsuit against prosecutors, sheriffs, and investigators, claiming he had been wrongfully accused and maliciously prosecuted. He insisted that law enforcement had destroyed his life, damaged his reputation, and torn apart his family. And with his daughters still publicly defending him, Barry presented himself not as a murderer, but as a man wronged by the system. But the public remained divided. To many, the lies, the inconsistencies, the strange behavior, and the circumstantial evidence all still pointed squarely at Barry. How could they ignore the fact that he had been caught changing his story again and again, that he had disposed of multiple trash bags the very day Suzanne disappeared, that he had spent the night her phone went silent driving around his property, turning his phone off and opening his truck doors more than 80 times. These weren't coincidences, they looked like the actions of a man trying to cover his tracks. And yet, others argued that without forensic proof, without a murder weapon, and now with DNA tying Suzanne's case to other violent offenders, Barry couldn't simply be declared guilty in the court of public opinion. What if, after all this time, Suzanne had really fallen prey to a stranger? What if the bike and helmet being staged near the home had been the work of someone trying to frame Barry, knowing suspicion would inevitably fall on him first? The district attorney for Colorado's 12th Judicial District issued a carefully worded statement after the discovery of Suzanne's remains. She confirmed that the investigation was still active and ongoing, and that they could not yet provide further details about how Suzanne died or who might be responsible. What she did make clear, however, was that the case was far from over. Authorities had no intention of closing it until the truth was uncovered. For Suzanne's family, especially her brother Andrew, the news brought both relief and heartbreak. Relief that after years of uncertainty, they finally knew where she was. Heartbreak that she had been left in a shallow grave, denied the dignity she deserved, and that no one had yet been held accountable. And so the mystery of Suzanne Morphew endures. On one side stands Barry, the husband whose bizarre stories, missing alibis, and suspicious behavior cast a long shadow over him. On the other, the unsettling possibility of a serial predator whose DNA has already been linked to multiple unsolved crimes in other states. Did Barry act alone? disposing of Suzanne in a location so remote that he believed she would never be found. Did he have help, perhaps from someone close, who assisted in moving her body while he carefully constructed an alibi? Or, most chilling of all, did Suzanne's disappearance have nothing to do with Barry at all? Could she have crossed paths with a dangerous stranger, someone whose crimes extend far beyond Colorado, and become just one more victim in a string of horrors? At this point, the evidence leaves the door open to all of these possibilities. The only certainty is that Suzanne's story isn't over. Barry's lawsuit against law enforcement is still moving forward, with his legal team determined to clear his name once and for all. Investigators, meanwhile, continue to sift through evidence, interview witnesses, and pursue every lead. The discovery of Suzanne's remains has given them a starting point they didn't have before. Perhaps from her final resting place, answers will emerge that could not be found in 3 years of searching. But until then, the Suzanne Morphew case sits in that eerie place between justice and mystery. A family torn apart, a husband either wrongfully accused or hiding a terrible secret, and the possibility of a serial killer lurking in the shadows. It is a story that continues to haunt not just Colorado, but everyone who has followed it. And as with all unsolved mysteries, the question remains, will we ever know the full truth about what happened to Suzanne Morphew? Or will her case remain one more tragic puzzle, forever marked by doubt, suspicion, and unanswered questions?